The moment Isaiah said, "I'm the new owner of this mall," Lydia laughed at his work boots before she ever looked at the signature. The fingerprint scanner beeped once. A single green light blinked above the door to the executive suite. Access granted. It was there for less than 2 seconds before Lydia Harrington's hand came down, not slowly, not accidentally, but with the precise reflexive motion of someone swatting away something that had no business existing. Her other hand was already moving. She picked up the glass cleaner from the edge of the desk, pressed the nozzle, and sprayed the surface of the biometric panel with one long, deliberate stroke. She wiped it clean. She set the bottle down. She did not look at him. "The system has been glitching all morning," she said. Isaiah Harlan said nothing. He was 42 years old, wearing a faded gray work jacket over dark cargo pants, steel-toed boots still carrying the scuff marks of a long morning. He stepped in and set a manila envelope on the conference table. "My name is Isaiah Harlan," he said. "I'm the new owner of this property." The room went still. Then it didn't. The administrative coordinator by the window pressed her lips together. One of the junior managers turned in his chair, and Lydia let out a short, clean laugh, half amusement, half dismissal, the kind you release when something is too small to argue with. She looked at him for the first time. The look traveled from his face, down the jacket, past the cargo pants, stopping at the boots. 2 seconds. A full inventory. Whatever conclusion it reached, she did not bother to conceal. "Sir," she folded her hands on the table. "I appreciate the confidence, but Theodore Langford's estate is still in process, and until the legal transfer clears through our structure, no one walks into this office claiming ownership." She paused, and in that pause let her eyes drop to his boots one more time. "Especially without an appointment." "I have an appointment," Isaiah said. "Brent." She didn't raise her voice. The security officer near the far wall straightened immediately. "Can you help this gentleman find the appropriate exit?" Isaiah reached forward and slid the top sheet from the envelope. One page, dense with legal text, heavy with the kind of formatting that only estate attorneys produced. He turned it face up and pushed it across the table toward her. "You should look at that carefully," he said, "before you laugh." Lydia pulled the document toward her with the deliberate pace of someone indulging a formality they intend to dismiss. She scanned it. Her expression did not change, but her eyes stopped moving for a fraction of a second somewhere near the bottom of the page. She set the document down and turned to the computer at the corner of the conference table. "I'm going to pull up our system," she said, "so we can settle this properly." Her fingers moved quickly, entering the property management dashboard. The screen faced partly away from Isaiah, but he watched the light shift on her face as the results loaded. Watched the specific stillness that moved through her when she found what she had not wanted to find. For one instant, the screen was visible. Ownership transfer pending. Locked by admin. L. Harrington. Then she closed the window. It took less than a second, but Priya, seated across the table, had already seen it. She looked down at her keyboard and did not look back up. "The system is showing a pending flag," Lydia said evenly. "That's standard during any major transition." Isaiah had not looked at the screen. He was looking at the wall of security monitors near the door, the feeds cycling through cameras every few seconds. His eyes found the one showing the main atrium entrance. His daughter was there. Maya was 15. She was standing in the atrium corridor with her backpack still on, a small bunch of yellow grocery store flowers in one hand, while a security guard went through her bag one item at a time in full view of the lunch crowd moving past her. Isaiah knew those flowers. He had seen them on the kitchen counter that morning, wrapped in plastic, the kind of yellow that was almost too bright to look at directly. She had not said why she was bringing them. He had not asked. Now, watching them slip from her hand and fall to the atrium floor, he understood he did not need to. Isaiah took one step toward the door. "Mr. Harlan." Lydia moved to the center of the room, not dramatically, precisely. "You are currently in a restricted management area, and you have not been cleared to leave while we verify your documentation. If you attempt to exit, I will treat that as a security incident." "My daughter is being detained." "Our security team is doing their job." "She's 15 years old. She's carrying flowers." "Mr. Harlan, please remain in this area." Isaiah stopped. He stood 6 feet from the door and looked at the monitor. On the screen, the paper wrapping on the flowers slipped. The bunch fell. The current of passing shoppers moved around Maya without pausing, and within 2 minutes, 3 of the yellow flowers had been stepped on, crushed flat against the polished atrium floor, bright yellow going dark and thin. Maya did not reach for them. She stood very straight, shoulders up just slightly, chin level, eyes fixed on the middle distance. He recognized that posture. He had described it to her once, on an ordinary evening at the kitchen sink, without making it a lesson, just a thing, he said, the way parents pass things on without ceremony. When someone wants you to be small, the only answer is to stay the same size. She had been 12. She had kept drying the plate in her hand and said nothing. He had not known she had filed it somewhere permanent. Now he watched her hold herself in a public corridor while strangers stepped on her flowers, and the feeling that moved through him was not anger, or not only anger. It was the particular grief of a parent who has done everything right and still cannot close the distance between his child and the world's specific cruelties. He stayed where he was, because staying was the only thing that protected her right now. And Isaiah Harlan had spent his entire adult life making decisions based on what actually protected the people he loved, not on what felt like it should. Nobody in the room was moving. Priya had stopped typing entirely. The junior manager who had laughed a few minutes earlier was studying the floor. The administrative coordinator by the window had her hand on her mouse, not clicking anything. The silence had weight. Isaiah did not look away from the monitor. That morning, he had stood at the kitchen window with his coffee while Maya ate breakfast and thought about what today actually was. Not in the abstract. He had been thinking about it in the abstract for weeks. He thought about it in the specific. The drive to the property, the elevator to the 3rd floor, the door with the biometric panel. He had been in the building twice before on unannounced site visits, both times in this same jacket, and had walked every floor and ridden every escalator, and taken notes about the ones that needed attention. He had not been nervous then. He was not nervous now. What he felt, standing at the kitchen window, was ready. And readiness, he had learned, felt a lot like quiet. Maya had noticed. "You're doing the quiet thing," she said. "I'm always quiet." "You're doing the quieter thing." He had worked warehouse logistics for most of his adult life, not because he lacked options. He had a mind that ran numbers and operational patterns the way other people ran routes, automatically, ahead of where he was supposed to be looking. But warehouse work paid consistently, and when you were raising a child alone, consistent mattered more than ambitious. Theodore Langford had found him at Facility 7 off Route 22 in the fall of 2009. Langford was the kind of billionaire you did not know was a billionaire until someone told you. 10-year-old Buick, dress shirts rolled to the elbow, the habit of walking every operational floor he intended to acquire, dressed like he belonged on it. Isaiah had approached him not because he recognized him, but because Langford had been standing in front of a routing manifest with a systematic error in it, and Isaiah had passed him twice and could not walk away a 3rd time. "That's a 17-pallet mismatch," Isaiah had said. "It'll surface in 3 days. The error is in how this terminal reads the return codes. Langford had looked at him for a moment. How long have you known? About an hour. I flagged it 2 days ago. They said it was within tolerance. It is not within tolerance. No, Isaiah said. It is not. That conversation lasted 6 minutes. The relationship that followed lasted 14 years. Consultancy, then partnership, then equity in 2 commercial properties, all of it quiet and deliberate and never once photographed. Isaiah had learned early that certain rooms would not open for him regardless of what he carried, and that the only way to change that was to become the person who owned the room. Langford had understood this without needing it explained. Langford died in February. 3 weeks before, he had called Isaiah to Connecticut and said simply, "I'm giving you Summit." Not asking, stating, "I want someone running it who understands what it means to work and who knows that dignity is not a decoration." "There will be people who don't believe it," Isaiah had said. "I know," Langford said. "That is partly why I am doing it." Before Isaiah left the house this morning, Maya had stopped at the front door and looked back at him, straight on, without hedging. "It's yours," she said. He had not thought to change his jacket. Later, he would decide he was glad. Now he stood in the management office, watching his daughter hold herself straight on the security monitor, and the room around him was as still as a room gets when everyone in it knows something has gone wrong, and nobody wants to be the one to say it first. Lydia turned from the monitor and set her palms flat on the conference table. "The documentation you've presented has not been authenticated through our legal office," she said. "It was filed with the county recorder's office on Monday morning," Isaiah said. "The deed transfer is public record." "The deed transfer is pending completion of estate proceedings." "The estate proceedings completed last Thursday." A small silence. "Regardless," Lydia said, and Isaiah had learned over the years that when a person opened a sentence with "regardless," they were about to say something they already knew was not going to hold. "I have a responsibility to verify documentation before I can take any action." She looked at the envelope on the table. "That documentation may constitute internal property records removed from this office without authorization. I need it retained for legal review." Brent looked at the envelope. He looked at Isaiah. He picked it up. Isaiah did not reach for it back. He watched Brent hold the documents. He watched Lydia smooth the front of her jacket. He watched Priya continue to study her keyboard with the concentration of someone pretending to be invisible. "Evidence of document misuse," Isaiah said. "It's a precaution," Lydia said. "Standard protocol." He repeated it quietly. Standard protocol. Like a man filing something away for later. Brent moved to the door and held it open. The escort was clear without being stated. Isaiah walked. They moved through the corridor toward the elevator, Brent half a step behind. Isaiah was not hurrying. He moved at the pace of someone reading a building, and he was reading it. He had studied the operational schematics of this property for 3 weeks, cross-referencing the maintenance logs the estate attorney had provided, and what he was seeing confirmed what the paper had shown. A building managed for appearances, not for systems. The cosmetic surfaces were impeccable. The infrastructure was tired. You could see it if you knew where to look. They passed the junction at the top of the B-wing escalator bank. Isaiah stopped. He listened for 2 seconds. Beneath the ambient mall noise, there was a pitch in the mechanical sound that was slightly, consistently wrong. The sound a motor makes when it has been running hard against a resistance it was not designed to sustain. "Escalator B is about to fail," he said. "Stop it now or it shuts itself down in the next few minutes." Marcus, the operations coordinator near the back of the office, looked up sharply. His hand moved toward his radio. Lydia had come as far as the doorway. "Marcus," Just his name, flat and weighted, his hand lowered. She looked at Isaiah. Her expression carried the tolerant patience of someone managing something beneath them. "Observation," she said, "is not the same as authority." Isaiah nodded once and let himself be walked to the elevator. Behind him, above B Wing, a motor continued running at a threshold no one had decided to address. Not yet. The main concourse of Westfield Summit was at full Thursday midday volume. Polished marble, high glass, anchor stores at either end, the original 1991 fountain at the center. The lunch crowd moved through it without looking up, the usual Thursday pace, purposeful and unhurried. Isaiah was standing near the fountain when the public address system crackled to life. It was not a retail announcement. It was Lydia's voice, clean, professional, carrying through every speaker in the building. "Attention, Westfield Summit shoppers and staff. We want to make you aware of an individual in the main concourse who has been presenting fraudulent ownership documents and claiming to be the new owner of this property. For your security, this individual is being escorted by our team, and there is no cause for alarm." Isaiah went still. Around him, the lunch crowd slowed. Heads turned. A group of teenagers near the pretzel kiosk had their phones out within 4 seconds. On the display monitor above the food court entrance, one of the internal screens the management office could override, a live feed appeared. The camera was positioned above and to the left of the fountain, pointed directly at Isaiah. An internal live stream. The entire mall watching in real time. Claiming to be the owner. A man in his 50s, work shirt and lanyard, said it to his companion with a laugh. "In those boots." A woman glanced at Isaiah and looked away fast, the way you do when you don't want to be associated with what you're seeing. Brent stood at Isaiah's left shoulder, the envelope in his hand, looking at the middle distance. Isaiah did not move. He had stood in rooms like this before. Different rooms, same geometry. He put his hands in his pockets and stayed where he was. His phone buzzed. "Dad, I'm here. The security guard stopped me at the atrium entrance." He looked up. Through the glass wall of the atrium, perhaps 40 feet away, he could see Maya. She was standing with her backpack still on, while a security guard went through it one item at a time in full view of the foot traffic moving past her. A small sticker on the front of her jacket, placed there by the guard, read, "Suspect." Isaiah took a step toward the atrium. "Sir," Brent said it quietly, "Ms. Harrington asked that you remain in this area." "My daughter is, sir, I have to ask you." Isaiah stopped. He stopped because there was no version of this moment where physical movement helped. He was a black man in a work jacket who had just been announced over the PA as a fraud, and if he moved toward a security guard who was already detaining his child, the next phone video would be much worse than the ones currently being made of him. He read the room. He stayed. He stood and watched through the glass as Maya held herself exactly as he had described, shoulders up just slightly, chin level, eyes fixed on the middle distance. The flowers had dropped again. This time the paper had fully torn, and the current of passing shoppers moved around them without pausing, and the yellow blooms were being pressed flat against the marble, one, by people who did not notice them. Maya did not reach for them. She stood straight and let the guard finish. The internal live stream above the food court continued broadcasting his stillness to the entire building. Around him, the crowd kept filming. The man in the work shirt was still laughing. And Isaiah stood at the fountain his mall was built around and looked at his daughter through 40 feet of glass and did not move. Because love, in that moment, meant being exactly where he was. Near the edge of the growing circle of onlookers, the woman in the cleaning uniform was watching him. Somewhere in her 50s, mop in one hand, yellow caution cone in the other. She was not laughing. She had been watching his face since Lydia's announcement, with the careful attention of someone reading a situation that most of the room had already decided to misread. "He doesn't look like no liar to me," she said quietly, to no one in particular. The man beside her kept filming. Then, cutting through the ambient mall noise like a flat, hard pulse, an alarm. Not a fire alarm, a mechanical alarm, the specific 3-beat pulse of an emergency system rising from the B-wing, followed within seconds by the grinding shudder of an escalator coming to a forced stop. The crowd near the food court entrance stumbled to a halt. Someone gasped. The escalator had stopped mid-run with 40 feet of passengers on it, and the entire B-wing went into that suspended stillness of a near miss. The few seconds after something almost happened. Isaiah looked toward B-wing. He said nothing, but several people near the fountain had heard what he said upstairs. They looked at the stopped escalator. They looked at the man standing by the fountain in his work jacket. A few of them lowered their phones. The laughter had stopped. What replaced it was not sympathy, not yet. It was the first hairline crack in a certainty that, 5 minutes ago, had seemed solid enough to stand on. Lydia came down the main staircase at a pace that was faster than she would have preferred anyone to see. The escalator incident had not caused injuries, a minor brake failure, the kind that happened in aging facilities. But it had happened within minutes of Isaiah Harlan saying it would, in front of witnesses, and Lydia was smart enough to know that the crowd's arithmetic was already running. She approached Isaiah with composure she had constructed rather than felt. Jacket straight, expression neutral. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "I want to address a few things regarding our process." Isaiah looked at her. The internal live stream had stopped. The phones were still out, but fewer pointed at him. The crowd had rearranged itself into the loose ring of people who believe something worth watching is still happening. "Your attorneys will address it," Isaiah said. "That's a combative framing for a situation that, Ms. Harrington." His voice stayed exactly where it always was. "You had my legal documentation confiscated on the grounds that it was stolen property. You made a PA announcement to several hundred shoppers identifying me as a fraudster. You activated an internal live stream with my image while that announcement was playing, and you had my 15-year-old daughter's bag searched in the main atrium and a suspect sticker placed on her jacket." He said it like a man reading from a list he had kept for a long time. "Those are the facts of the last 45 minutes. A woman near the edge of the crowd lowered her phone slightly. Lydia held her expression where she had placed it. "The announcement was for security I know why you said it was," Isaiah said. He looked down at his left wrist. He wore a watch, had worn it for 22 years. A Seiko 5 automatic in a brushed stainless case. Not expensive, not flashy. The crystal had a hairline scratch in the lower left corner. The bracelet had been replaced once. He had bought it with the first paycheck from the first job that required him to be somewhere on time every morning, in a city where he knew no one, with a 4-year-old daughter and a house he could barely afford. Lydia noticed it. Something moved across her face, the reflex of a person who has just found one more piece of evidence for a conclusion she reached the moment he walked in. She reached for the watch as if she could strip it off his wrist and throw it away with the rest of what she had dismissed that morning. Isaiah's hand closed around her wrist, light, deliberate, stopping her 3 inches short. He held it for 1 second, then released her. The crowd had seen it. The silence that followed had a different quality from everything before it. Not shock, recognition. The crowd processing in real time what the gesture had revealed about both of them, about what she had reached for and why, and about the patience it had taken to stop her that quietly. Isaiah looked at his watch. He looked at it the way he looked at it every morning, like a receipt he kept to remind himself what things actually cost. "My daughter was 4 years old when I bought this," he said. "I had just started a night shift job, I needed to know what time it was when I woke up, what time I needed to leave, what time I could still call her before she went to sleep. He paused. It does not remind me of who I am. It reminds me of what it feels like to be looked down on by people who decided what I was worth before I had finished speaking. He looked up and met Lydia's eyes. I am not going to argue with you about who I am, he said. The paperwork does that. Two people near the fountain had turned to face Lydia instead of Isaiah. A third lowered his phone. The woman in the cleaning uniform had moved closer to the fountain, inside the ring now rather than at its edge. And at the top of the main staircase, a man in a dark suit appeared. Mid-50s, leather briefcase, descending with the deliberate calm of someone informed en route of exactly what he was walking into. His name was David Weir, Theodore Langford's senior estate attorney for 11 years. He had been in traffic on the 95 for 40 minutes, and from the look on his face, it had not improved his opinion of what he was arriving to resolve. He came down the stairs and did not look at Lydia. He looked at Isaiah. I apologize for the delay, he said. Traffic on the 95. He set his briefcase on the fountain ledge and opened it. I have the certified copies. County seal and notarization processed this morning. He glanced at the crowd, not addressing it, just acknowledging it, the way attorneys acknowledge rooms when those rooms have become relevant. The ownership transfer of Westfield Summit and all associated commercial entities to Mr. Isaiah Harlan became legally effective as of 9:47 this morning. He held out the document. Isaiah took it. He held it without looking at it. He had read it 12 times already. Lydia looked at Ware, then at the document in Isaiah's hand. The estate filing is still subject to administrative confirmation through our own Ms. Harrington. Ware set a second document on the fountain ledge. I want to make sure we are all working from the same record. He looked at the administrative terminal near the security desk. May I? Nobody stopped him. He crossed to the terminal with the IT staff member who had materialized from the corridor, and they moved through the property management system with the efficiency of two people who had compared notes on the drive over. Isaiah stood near the fountain and spoke. He did not raise his voice. He addressed the crowd because the crowd was there, and because what he was saying was factual, and because the facts were going to be confirmed in 2 minutes regardless. He named the trust. He named the holding structure. He named the transfer clause and the year the beneficiary designation had been filed. He spoke without notes, without hesitation, without once glancing at the document in his hand, like a man who had not heard about this deal yesterday, but had been part of it for years. One of the operations managers at the edge of the crowd had gone completely still. He looked at his colleague. His colleague looked back. That kind of detail did not live in any document circulated to mall staff. It lived in filings and private operating agreements and the working knowledge of people who had been inside the deal. You could only have known it if you had been at the table. Several employees were looking at each other with expressions that were revising something. At the terminal, the IT staff member said, Lydia, I'm seeing the ownership transfer notification. It was delivered to your administrative account at 6:50 this morning. A pause. And there's an admin hold placed on the system display of that transfer at 7:14 this morning. A shorter pause, the kind that happens when someone reads something twice to make sure they read it right. The hold is tagged to your account credentials. The crowd heard it. The arithmetic was simple. The notification came in at 6:50. The lock went up at 7:14, and she came down to the concourse at 10:15 and told several hundred people this man was a fraud. It's standard during transitions, Lydia said quickly, turning toward the terminal. It's a security measure. Any admin can... The lock was placed 24 minutes after you received the ownership notification, Weir said, like a man reading a fact into a record. The crowd exhaled. Not a cheer, not a gasp, just the collective release of people who had done the math and did not like what it added up to. The phones that had been filming Isaiah turned. Lydia looked at the crowd, and in the faces looking back at her, the calculation was running the wrong direction. The smug half-smiles were gone. In their place was the specific discomfort of people who had been laughing at something that turned out not to be funny, and who were now looking at their own phones and realizing that every video they had made of a man standing calmly by a fountain while being publicly humiliated was now a document. Evidence of what they had watched. Evidence of what they had participated in. The footage they had shot to mock him had caught everything. The scanner, the glass cleaner, the PA announcement, the live stream, the sticker on a 15-year-old girl's jacket. They had filmed the whole thing, and now the whole thing was on their phones. "This is being taken out of context," Lydia said, to no one and everyone. Nobody answered her. Isaiah did not answer her. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. He typed one message. "Come find me by the fountain." Then he put the phone away and waited. The LED signage network in Westfield Summit ran on a centralized content management system. 47 screens throughout the property, the 4 largest positioned above the main concourse fountain, each one 12 feet wide, 6 feet high, calibrated for maximum visibility from the mall's main entrance. At 12:44 in the afternoon, the system updated. Not because anyone in the immediate vicinity pressed a button. It updated because the ownership transfer had been finalized and uploaded to the property management platform at 9:47 that morning, with an instruction from the estate attorney's office to trigger a public display upon verification completion. A detail that Theodore Langford had specified in the administrative handover notes with his characteristic attention to the gesture that mattered. The screens went dark for 2 seconds. Then they lit. Not a corporate headshot, not a portrait from a boardroom or a charity gala. A photograph from Facility 7 off Route 22, fall of 2011. Low resolution, the kind a site manager takes for an internal quarterly report. In it, Theodore Langford stood at the corner of the east aisle with his dress shirt rolled to the elbow, looking at a routing manifest. Standing beside him, pointing at the lower right column of that manifest, was Isaiah Harlan, in a work jacket not entirely unlike the one he was wearing now. Above the photograph, in the clean sans serif font that had been Langford's brand standard for 30 years, Westfield Summit welcomes its new owner, Isaiah Harlan. Effective April 14th, 2026. The concourse did not just go quiet. It went the kind of quiet that happens when a room full of people simultaneously realizes it has been wrong about something. The specific, uncomfortable silence of collective recalibration. Not peaceful. Charged. The silence of people looking at a photograph of a man in a work jacket standing beside a billionaire in a warehouse aisle, and understanding, all at once, that the man they had laughed at for the last 2 hours had been exactly who he said he was from the moment he walked through the door, and that every second of it had been recorded. That was the thing that moved through the crowd like a current, not just the screens, the phones, their own phones, still warm in their hands, still holding the videos they had made. The footage of Isaiah standing at the fountain while Lydia's voice came through the speakers. The footage of him being escorted. The footage of them laughing. They had documented themselves on the wrong side of this. The mockery they had aimed at him was now a record of their own judgment, and their own judgment had just been proven wrong on 47 screens simultaneously. A man near the pretzel kiosk lowered his phone and put it in his pocket. He did not look at the person standing next to him. The teenagers who had been filming since the beginning were looking at their screens with expressions that did not resemble the ones they had worn 20 minutes ago. Lydia looked at the photograph. Then she looked at the crowd. And in the faces looking back at her, she found nothing to hold on to. The employees who had deferred to her all morning were not deferring now. The security officer who had held the envelope was looking at the marble floor. The administrative coordinator who had turned in her chair an hour ago was watching the screens with an expression that contained something close to relief. Even Brent, who had spent the morning following instructions he had been privately uncertain about, had taken 2 steps sideways, away from Lydia, toward no one in particular, but away. She opened her mouth. "This is not what it—" "Ms. Harrington." Cheryl Washington, Senior Operations Manager, 9 years with the property, spoke from the edge of the concourse. Quietly, without theater. The voice of someone who had been watching all morning and had decided this was the moment. "I think it would be better if you didn't say anything else right now." Lydia looked at Cheryl. Cheryl looked back with the steady patience of a woman who had been in this building longer than anyone currently standing in it, and who had seen enough to know exactly what was happening and exactly how it was going to end. Lydia said nothing more. Isaiah watched the screens cycle through the display one more time. The warehouse photograph. His name. The date. He had not planned for the photograph to be there. That had been Langford's instruction, placed in the estate files 2 years before his death, with a note in his own handwriting. Use the one from Facility 7, not the portrait, the one where he's working. Isaiah stood in the mall that was his, and understood exactly what the old man had meant. What followed was not a single dramatic moment. It was an accumulation. David Weir spent the next 40 minutes at the administrative terminal with the IT staff and 2 senior operations managers, walking through the ownership documentation in full. The system restored Isaiah's access credentials. The administrative hold on the ownership transfer was reviewed, documented, and flagged for the legal record. The security footage from the morning was requested, not by Isaiah, but by Cheryl Washington, who wanted the record to be complete. Lydia was asked to surrender her administrative credentials at 1:15 in the afternoon. She handed over the lanyard and access card and walked to the elevator without looking back at the concourse. She was placed on immediate suspension pending a full review, and by late afternoon, the mall's parent company had been informed. The public announcement came at 1:47, a formal introduction delivered by Weir on Isaiah's behalf, informing tenants and staff that Mr. Isaiah Harlan had assumed ownership effective that morning and would be meeting with department heads and tenant representatives over the coming 2 weeks. It mentioned, without elaboration, that certain administrative policies would be under review. Isaiah was not listening to the announcement. He was watching the atrium entrance. The concourse had returned to its afternoon rhythm, the lunch crowd thinning, the retail music cycling back through its playlist, the fountain running the same as it always had. From the outside, if you had arrived in the last 20 minutes and known nothing of what preceded, you would have seen a Thursday afternoon in a shopping mall. Unremarkable. Ordinary. The surface of things reasserting itself the way surfaces always do, patient and indifferent, regardless of what has happened just beneath them. But Isaiah had not arrived in the last 20 minutes. He stood at the fountain and felt the full weight of the morning. Not with bitterness, not with the particular satisfaction of a man who has just won something, but with the specific, grounded awareness of someone who has been through something real and is still standing in the exact place where it happened. The marble beneath his boots was the same marble. The fountain behind him made the same sound. The overhead light came from the same high windows. Everything was the same. And everything was different. Maya came through the atrium entrance at a run, not the careful walk from an hour ago, shoulders braced against a room that had decided something about her. Just running, backpack bouncing, the remaining yellow flowers still somehow in her hand, crossing the concourse in the long, unself-conscious stride of a person moving toward something they are certain of. She reached him and put both arms around him, and Isaiah held his daughter in the center of his mall while the concourse went about its afternoon around them. He held her the way he had held her when she was small enough that holding her was the whole answer to everything. Before homework and heartbreak and the complicated education of growing up, when the distance between a problem and its solution was exactly the length of his arms. She was not small anymore. She was 15 and nearly as tall as his shoulder, and when she pulled back, he could see, in the set of her face, something that had not been there in the atrium footage an hour ago. She was not braced against anything. She was just herself. After a moment, she stepped back. She reached up to the front of her jacket with 2 fingers and peeled off the small white sticker the security guard had placed there an hour before. She held it between her thumb and forefinger, looked at the word printed on it in plain black type, crumpled it, and dropped it in the trash can 3 feet away. She did not say anything about it. She did not look around to see if anyone had noticed. She just stood up straight and met her father's eyes. Isaiah looked at his daughter. She was not standing the way she had stood in that atrium corridor. She was standing the way she stood when she was certain of something, fully, without performing it for anyone. He smiled, small, the kind that did not need to be large to mean what it meant. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Now I do the job," he said. "Is it a big job?" He looked around the concourse, the tables, the afternoon crowd, the ordinary machinery of a commercial space that housed several hundred jobs and a few hundred small businesses, and the daily rhythms of tens of thousands of people who lived nearby. "It's a big job," he said. She handed him one of the yellow flowers. He held it. They stood there together for a minute that neither of them tried to fill with words. Maya looked up at the screens above the fountain, which had cycled back to the standard promotional content. Seasonal sales, tenant announcements, the kind of rotating information that nobody particularly reads. The warehouse photograph was gone. Isaiah's name was gone. The mall looked exactly like it had looked at 9 this morning, before any of this had begun. "Did you know it would happen like that?" Maya asked. She was not asking about the legal outcome. She was asking about the rest of it. The PA announcement, the live stream, the crowd, the sticker on her jacket. The specific shape the morning had taken. "No," Isaiah said. "Were you scared?" He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, the way he had always considered her questions. Maya had never responded well to answers that were shorter than the truth. "There was a moment," he said, "when I saw you through the glass, when I couldn't get to you. That was the hardest part." She was quiet for a moment. "I figured you'd come when you could," she said. "So I just waited." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "I watched you." She absorbed that, the knowledge that he had been watching, that she had been seen, that the posture she had held alone in a public corridor had been witnessed by the one person whose witness mattered to her. Isaiah watched something settle in her face. Not resolution exactly, something quieter than that. The specific piece of a person who has held themselves together under pressure and discovered afterward that they were capable of it. That was the thing about dignity Isaiah had come to understand over the course of his life. You could not give it to another person directly. You could describe it, model it, create the conditions where it might take root, but the moment of actually holding it, the moment of standing in a corridor with flowers on the floor and a sticker on your jacket and strangers walking past, that moment belonged entirely to the person living it. Maya had held herself through that moment without him. She had done it on her own, and she would carry that knowledge now, in a place no one could reach, for the rest of her life. That was worth more than the mall. In the 2 weeks that followed, Isaiah Harlan introduced himself to every department head, every cleaning staff supervisor, every security team lead, and most of the food court vendors. He did it without fanfare and without an entourage. One conversation at a time, in the corridors and stockrooms and break areas where people actually spent their working days. He asked questions more than he made statements. He took notes by hand in a small notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. He was not performing accessibility. He was doing what he had always done, reading the operational reality of a place by talking to the people who ran it from the ground up. Some of those conversations were easy, some were not. Two of the security officers who had been on duty that morning requested to speak with him privately. They came to the management office together, which told Isaiah something about the nature of their discomfort, that they had needed each other's company to walk through the door. They did not offer excuses. They offered acknowledgement. One of them, a man in his late 30s named Garrett, said, "I knew something was wrong about halfway through the morning. I didn't do anything about it." He paused. "I should have." Isaiah looked at him for a moment. "What stopped you?" Garrett thought about it honestly, which Isaiah respected. "She was the manager," he said finally. "She had always been the manager." "I know," Isaiah said. "That's exactly the problem we're going to fix." He reinstated a staff recognition program that had been quietly discontinued under the previous administration. He established a formal complaint channel for employees who experienced or witnessed discriminatory treatment, with anonymous submission and mandatory review timelines. He made one small operational change that no press release mentioned. The fingerprint scanner outside the executive suite was reprogrammed so that its access log was visible, auditable, and could not be modified by a single administrator account. He also called Marcus, the young operations coordinator who had reached for his radio when Isaiah mentioned the escalator, and then put his hand down when Lydia said his name. He did not call to reprimand him. He called to tell him that the instinct had been right, and that in this building going forward, the right instinct would be enough. Marcus was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. "I should have called it in," he said. "You will next time," Isaiah said. "That's all any of this is. Getting it right the next time." He never made a public statement about what had happened on the day he walked in. He did not give interviews. He did not respond to the media requests that arrived in the days after the mall's internal footage circulated online. The footage of the scanner, the glass cleaner, the PA announcement, the live stream, the sticker on a 15-year-old girl's jacket. He let it exist without his commentary because it did not need any. The cleaning woman's name was Rosalie Okafor. She had worked the concourse floor for 11 years. She had arrived at this mall at 41 years old, newly arrived in the country, with credentials that the hiring system had not known how to read, and a work ethic that the building's floors bore witness to every morning. She had mopped this concourse through 4 different general managers, through 2 ownership transitions, through a renovation that had lasted 18 months, and left the floor finishes uneven in the B-wing junction in a way that made her mop route slightly longer every single shift. She had been promised a supervisory role 3 times in 3 years by 3 different people in that management office, and 3 times the promise had dissolved into silence. 2 weeks after Isaiah assumed ownership, she received a formal letter confirming her promotion to floor operations supervisor for the main concourse. The letter outlined her new responsibilities, her new compensation, and the names of the 2 staff members who would be reporting to her. It was written in plain language. It did not over-explain or qualify. It stated what was true and what had been decided, the way a document should. It was signed by Isaiah Harlan. Rosalie read it twice at her kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, with the television on in the background and her reading glasses on the end of her nose. Then she folded it along its original crease and put it in the drawer where she kept the things she did not want to lose. It was not a grand gesture. It was not designed to be. It was the outcome of a man who paid attention to who was in the room and what they deserved and what had been withheld from them without justification. Maya came by the following Saturday. She walked the whole property with a notebook and asked questions about leasing structures, foot traffic patterns, and whether the mall had considered a dedicated community event space. She spent 20 minutes talking to Rosalie Okafor near the fountain, asking about the logistics of managing a floor this size, taking notes with the focused attention of someone who intended to use what she was learning. Rosalie answered her questions directly and without condescension, the way people answer questions when they have been asked by someone who genuinely wants to know. At one point, Rosalie looked at Maya and said, "Your father, he say good morning every day, even before any of this. Both times he came through on his visits." She nodded once, as if confirming something she had decided some time ago. "That's how I knew." Maya wrote that down too. In the parking garage elevator going down, she said, "I want to understand how you make something yours." Isaiah looked at his daughter. "You show up," he said, "in the work jacket and in the good jacket. You show up the same way either time." She wrote it down. He watched her write it down and felt the fullness of a man who had spent his whole life building something that no one could see until it was already finished. And then it was not the building they saw. It was the person standing next to him, with her notebook and her good questions, and one yellow flower pressed between the pages. That was what he had built. And it was exactly enough.